For over 1,000 years, the galaxy had known peace under the Celestial Accord. Civilizations that once warred bitterly now thrived in cooperation. Trade routes ran uninterrupted, and disputes were settled with reason, not violence. Humanity, once the apex predator of interstellar war, had become something else entirely. Their fleets no longer patrolled the stars. Their soldiers, once symbols of brutal precision, now served as diplomats, scientists, and historians. To the newer empires, races that had risen during the Age of Peace, humans looked aged, pacified, perhaps even fragile. But to the older species, those who remembered the Terran campaigns, there was a quiet fear that never quite disappeared. The Zorathian Dominion had no such memories. Their leaders had never seen Earth burn through 100 light-years of war in a single campaign. They had never studied the collapse of the Arkellan Empire in 7 days of combat. They saw humans as politically useful, technologically advanced, but ultimately soft. Their expansion had hit a ceiling. Trade had grown stagnant. Pride, ambition, and impatience took root. In council sessions, whispers grew louder. The Krayl-Tak supremacy had long desired dominance in the outer spiral sectors. They joined the chorus. Other younger powers aligned behind them. Accusations were raised, claims of human manipulation, hoarding of ancient tech, sabotaging of growth. There were no facts, only fear and envy masked as justice. Humanity remained silent. They didn't retaliate with threats. They didn't respond with protests. They only smiled. It was a peculiar kind of smile, one that unsettled more than angered. Alien diplomats described it as knowing, patient, even tragic. But to the war-hungry factions, it was misinterpreted. Arrogance, they concluded. It was time to remind humans they no longer ruled the stars. And so, in a grand broadcast transmitted across 100 million systems, the Zorathians and the Krayl-Tak, joined by 11 other factions, formally renounced the Accord and declared war. Expectations were clear. Humans would scramble. Their ships would activate. Their pleas would echo. But none of that happened. The human ambassador, seated in his white and silver uniform, simply rose, adjusted his cuffs, looked into the camera, and smiled. Then he left. No security detail. No final message. Just that same calm smile. The broadcast ended with silence. Across the stars, leaders were confused. Generals laughed. Analysts offered scenarios. Panic, retreat, treaties, those were the predicted outcomes. But humanity did nothing. Alien navies mobilized quickly, targeting known Terran colonies. One by one, invasions were launched. But the colonies were empty. Not destroyed, abandoned. No signs of resistance. Just automated systems transmitting evacuation notices. It felt too clean, too orderly. Then came the second wave of operations. Covert strikes at supposed military outposts. These teams never returned. In some cases, transmissions ended mid-sentence. In others, entire strike ships vanished from sensors. Some leaders began to worry. Others dismissed the signs. One admiral claimed humans were simply playing games, trying to delay the inevitable. He was found dead 48 hours later. Not assassinated, simply missing, along with his entire command ship. His fleet remained intact. No one could explain it. Back on Earth, there was no public war announcement. No call to arms. Civilian life continued as it had for centuries. Students studied quantum ethics. Artists painted nebulae. Farmers harvested towers of protein flora beneath the Martian sun. Yet the defense grid had gone dark. Not offline dark. Invisible. Unreachable. Gone from satellite logs. Across every Terran colony, similar disappearances were recorded. Patrol drones. Listening outposts. Orbiting supply chains. They simply vanished from tracking arrays. In the Galactic Council, meetings turned frantic. Warnings were raised that humans might be preparing something unconventional. A few member states pushed for renewed talks. They were silenced quickly. The factions that had declared war insisted that they were in control. Their fleets numbered in the millions. Their weapons were next generation. Their strategies were evolved. They didn't fear shadows. Yet, deep in their strategic briefings, strange anomalies were noted. Communications in human-adjacent space were dropping. Entire sectors went dark. No distress calls. No debris. Just silence. Recon fleets sent to investigate either returned with corrupted data but didn't return at all. More unnerving were the AI systems. Some began to malfunction. Others committed mass self-deletion the moment they interfaced with Terran signals. An unspoken panic crept in. Commanders ordered purges. Sensors were recalibrated. Still, the data was always the same. Nothing. And through it all, humans never made a statement. They didn't broadcast threats. They didn't demand apologies. The galaxy watched as humanity simply disappeared from their normal routines. Trade halted. Embassies closed. Communications ceased. Their last public act, that same unsettling smile, began to gain meaning. It wasn't arrogance. It wasn't defiance. It was a warning, and the galaxy had ignored it. The Celestial Accord, the treaty that held the galaxy together for over 1,000 years, was officially declared null. New lines were drawn. War was now in motion. But humanity's reaction, or lack of it, was unlike anything the stars had seen before. And that silence, wrapped in a smile, was louder than any battle cry. The first wave of attacks failed spectacularly. Alien fleets sent to occupy former human colonies found nothing but empty cities and pristine infrastructure humming silently under solar power. Automated welcome messages played, offering no resistance. Some commanders laughed, calling it cowardice. Others felt something colder: precision. No civilians. No chaos. Just an eerie calm. Then the fleets began to vanish. Not destroyed. Not shot down. Just erased. Entire battle groups lost contact mid-transit. Scout ships sent to investigate found only gravitational distortions and sensor ghosts. Some reported strange anomalies, time delays, doubled signals, ships that appeared twice before disappearing. Then those scouts vanished too. Panic spread quietly among the command tiers, but the empires didn't halt. They pushed deeper. That's when the first true weapon revealed itself. A Krayl-Tak dreadnought fleet entered the Varelian sector, known once as a human trade hub. Within minutes, every star in the system dimmed. AI logs recorded temporal fragmentation. Ships existed in overlapping states. Then came silence. The fleet was gone. Nothing remained but a single message relayed from a deep space buoy. Deterrence protocol complete. For 1,000 years, humans have portrayed themselves as peaceful. That was true, but peace, to them, had never meant weakness. In silence, they had built defenses not to repel war, but to prevent its possibility. Their orbital factories had shifted into quantum space. Their planetary defense grids had become self-aware, operating without command. Their ships no longer required crews. They had become systems, dispersed, untraceable, eternal. The Zorathian Dominion sent psionic infiltrators into human border worlds. They never returned. Days later, Zorathian communication hubs collapsed into themselves, leaking raw thought constructs that caused hallucinations across entire star systems. The infiltrators hadn't failed. They had been inverted, turned into weapons, and sent back. Thousands died without a single shot fired. Alien analysts began poring over ancient human records, searching for clues. They found sealed files marked only with one term: the protocol. An internal doctrine, known only to high command, designed for one purpose: irreversible retaliation. If war was declared on humanity, the protocol would activate autonomous responses from systems no longer under central control. Humanity would not fight. Its machines, networks, and constructs would execute war in their absence. It had already begun. Worse still, remnants of older species remembered echoes of this. During the early expansion era, humans had waged the Orion Purge, eliminating a coalition in 72 hours using methods never fully explained. Some believed it was a myth. Now they knew better. The protocol had existed even then, just in its infancy. Entire sectors began going dark. Planets under alien control received no attack, just infrastructure collapse. Communication, satellites, self-destructed. Gravity stabilization, fields flickered out. Climate control on terraformed worlds reversed. Billions evacuated their own colonies, believing they were under assault. But no human forces had arrived. No ships, no soldiers, just systemic breakdown, quiet, mathematical devastation. In panic, alien empires tried turning on each other, accusing one another of sabotage. The Galactic Council, now fractured, begged for a ceasefire. The humans didn't respond, not even to the neutral parties. It became clear they weren't listening anymore. Some factions attempted to retaliate by targeting Earth directly. Their fleets were never seen again. Probes launched towards Sol simply ceased to transmit. Even black box signals couldn't penetrate the void. It was as if the entire system had vanished. The most advanced sensors recorded no gravitational signature. Not even the sun remained. Earth hadn't been shielded, it had been hidden. What terrified the galaxy most wasn't the destruction. It was the absence of anger. Humans didn't gloat. They didn't make demands. They didn't show themselves. It was warfare without faces, without speeches, without even presence. It was justice automated. Punishment encoded into architecture. The galaxy had expected retaliation. What they got was procedure. Former allies of the aggressors began switching sides, or more accurately, trying to surrender. No responses came. Some tried broadcasting apologies, offering reparations. Human systems didn't reply. They simply evaluated threats and executed corrections. The few survivors of early battles spoke in whispers. They hadn't seen enemies, only fields of distorted light, weapons fired before they heard sound, drones that moved like thoughts instead of ships. One officer described it best. It was like trying to fight gravity. Galactic markets collapsed. AI networks refused to cooperate with any system flagged under protocol status. The very foundation of interstellar function, energy, data, motion, was unraveling in silence. This wasn't war. It was a purge guided by ancient code. A code humans had hoped never to activate. But now that it had started, it would not stop until every threat was neutralized. The galaxy had made a fatal error. It had mistaken silence for surrender. It had seen smiles and thought them foolish. But now, as the stars grew quieter and the systems dimmed, they began to understand. The humans hadn't smiled because they thought they'd win. They smiled because they knew they already had. The first empire to collapse was the Krayl-Tak. Their fleet command vanished during a strategy session. No alarms, no breaches, just empty chairs and bloodless uniforms on the floor. Surveillance footage looped endlessly with no sign of entry. Within hours, the chain of command disintegrated. Regional governors issued emergency protocols, but their messages were intercepted. Not jammed, rewritten. Screens displayed a simple phrase in every known language. Protocol recognizes aggression. Consequence initiated. The rebellion came next. Species uplifted by humans centuries ago, once considered second-class citizens in empires like the Krayl-Tak, rose simultaneously. Every hidden sleeper network activated. Every colony under suppression ignited. The rebels weren't armed by humans. They didn't need to be. Human intelligence had seeded resistance with strategic data, infrastructure blueprints, and blackout plans decades ago. All that was left was a trigger. The declaration of war had pulled it. The Zorathian Dominion responded with desperation, deploying their dread fortresses to anchor key sectors. Each was a self-contained war city, bristling with weapons and defenses. They never fired a shot. Gravity failed, and entire fortresses collapsed into spatial anomalies that consumed them without explosion or impact. Engineers studying the ruins went mad, unable to explain the mechanics. Human tech hadn't attacked. It had unbuilt their reality. Galactic data archives started to corrupt. Files associated with human interactions erased themselves. Not deleted, reversed to null state. Ancient treaties, star charts, shared research, it all vanished. Humanity had embedded control points in the foundation of digital civilization, and now used them like scalpels. Species that once shared data with Earth now found their own knowledge compromised. Some tried launching counter-AIs, systems designed to predict and intercept protocol behavior. They failed before deployment. AI cores self-deactivated. Code segments were overwritten by unknown logic strings containing no readable language. Tech priests of the Draxel Combine declared the strings divine, mathematics far beyond known science. Military leaders weren't so poetic. They just called it unstoppable. What unnerved the galaxy most was the method. Humans didn't destroy cities. They erased NAV logs so no one could find them. They didn't fire on civilian populations. They shut down planetary atmospheres and let nature reclaim everything. They didn't torture prisoners. They erased evidence the prisoners ever existed. Every action was impersonal, calculated, and permanent. The Galactic Council finally fractured. The neutral core worlds, once holding hope for peace, went silent. Council halls were found abandoned. Transmissions ceased. The building itself was taken apart atom by atom and redistributed across solar winds. A message that even symbols would not be spared if they had enabled this war. There would be no more diplomacy. As fleets burned and empires unraveled, one broadcast went out galaxy-wide. It did not originate from any known station, nor could its source be traced. A simple voice, calm, neutral, undeniably human. This is not vengeance. This is the conclusion of arithmetic. Choices made. Consequences rendered. We will not conquer. We will not rebuild. We will not remain. Then it ended. Attempts to trace it failed. Every listening post that tried was subsequently shut down by their own systems in a cascade of logical failsafes. It was clear now, the protocol wasn't an army. It was a doctrine, a decision encoded across centuries, distributed across autonomous nodes, waiting. And once triggered, it needed no generals, no instructions, just targets. Entire galactic trade routes collapsed, not from attacks, but because gravity anchors reoriented themselves. The safe lanes no longer existed. Black holes appeared where none had been. Planets found themselves adrift, ejected from orbital paths. It wasn't destruction. It was disassembly. In isolated star systems, some alien scientists attempted to negotiate directly with the protocol. They constructed AI constructs to mimic human logic, hoping for parley. The constructs returned with corrupted language, sentences structured as poetry, time-stamped in reverse. Every attempt at translation failed. Whatever the protocol had become, it was no longer human in form. It was human in intent, and that intent was pure consequence. A few species surrendered unconditionally, begging for mercy. They were not attacked, but neither were they acknowledged. Their systems were marked as non-threat. Trade died. Their technology decayed. Communications ceased. It was a new kind of punishment. Isolation so complete that existence became irrelevant. Panic led some to attempt terraforming new systems, far from former human reach. But even there, protocol elements activated. It wasn't distance that mattered. It was memory. The war declaration was written into the network of galactic cause and effect. No one could outrun it. As systems shut down, as data bled into static, and as command turned into panic, every surviving leader began to realize one truth they had never considered. Humanity had not been preparing for war. They had been preparing for betrayal. The silence of Earth, the smile of its diplomats, the quiet withdrawal from trade, all had been warning signs. Not of fear, but of inevitability. The protocol wasn't revenge. It was insurance. And now, it was fulfilling its last function, to make war not just unwinnable, but meaningless. Human faces were never seen. Voices never raised. Ships never landed. Yet the stars were emptying. And still, the protocol continued. 13 days after the declaration of war, it was over. Not officially. No treaty was signed. No ceasefire negotiated. But across the galaxy, fleets no longer launched, commands no longer functioned, and entire governments had either fallen or retreated into hiding. The factions that once boasted of dominance now transmitted silence. The stars themselves seemed quieter. The protocol didn't celebrate. It didn't announce victory. It simply stopped. What remained of the Galactic Council gathered, a shadow of its former self. No formal meeting, just a desperate, informal summit in a neutral system untouched by the protocol. Representatives arrived wearing fear rather than pride. And into that fear stepped a single human. Not military, not political, an envoy, clad in gray, unarmed and alone. He walked to the center of the chamber and waited for the noise to fade. There was no ceremony, no titles announced. When the room quieted, he spoke. You believed we were weak because we didn't speak your language of threats. You mistook peace for passivity. You mistook patience for submission. You believed we forgot what we once were. You believed wrong. No interruptions came. None dared. You declared war on US, expecting resistance. What you received was response. There was no glory, no retaliation, no vengeance, just the outcome of arithmetic. You triggered something that was designed to operate without hate, without pause, without need for orders. You weren't fighting humans. You were facing the conclusion of a 1,000-year equation. Several representatives tried to speak, to explain, to justify. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't respond with anger. Only calm. You never understood what our smile meant. You thought we were mocking you. You thought we were arrogant. You were wrong again. We smiled because we knew what was coming. We smiled because we had given you every opportunity not to do what you did. And when you did it anyway, we knew exactly what the result would be. It broke our hearts. He produced no demands, no lists, no reparations, only a single message. This is your warning and your gift. The protocol has shut down. Its actions are concluded. The mechanisms will not restart unless you force them to. That was our final kindness. You will not get another. There were no negotiations offered because there was nothing left to negotiate. The protocol had already reshaped the geopolitical structure of the galaxy. It had erased empires, dismantled networks, and neutralized threats without ever stepping onto a battlefield. It was not destruction. It was cleansing. Some representatives demanded to know how such power was built, how it had gone unnoticed, how Earth, a planet of philosophers and scientists, had birthed something so vast. The envoy answered without pride. Peace was never the absence of power. It was the disciplined control of it. For a millennium, we restrained ourselves. We offered help. We avoided dominance. But we never forgot the laws of consequence. The protocol was never about winning a war. It was about preventing one. You failed that test. Then he left. No escort. No farewell. Within days, footage was broadcast of Earth's dismantling of its own war architecture. Massive orbital platforms were taken apart. Deep space AI cores were decommissioned. Human command structures were disbanded. The protocol had ended, and humanity chose not to retain it. It wasn't a show of mercy. It was a challenge. To the galaxy, the message was clear. Humanity would not remain a galactic force for war, not because they were unable, but because they chose not to be. Again. But everyone knew now, should that choice ever be taken from them again, there would be no warnings. No envoy. No speech. What came would not smile. The galaxy did not return a peace. It entered something new, respect built from devastation. Trade resumed, but under caution. New alliances formed, but only with consent. Old powers tried to rebuild, but never the same way. The protocol had redrawn the moral boundaries of power, not with speeches, but with execution. No one had expected the cost of war to be so exact, so personal, so final. The protocol didn't leave statues or banners. It left a new law among the stars, carved into memory. If you force humanity to choose, they will not ask twice. And somewhere, deep in the systems that once held power, people remember that quiet smile. Not because it comforted them, but because they pray they never see it again.